Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome back to the VoskCoin YouTube channel. I'm Vosk, here with Scott, Digital Shovel, and we're gonna break down just exactly what he does and more importantly, what he makes, which are pretty cool. So Scott, just tell us about the pods.
Yeah, so we built a modular data center that can run by itself or in a big string, and they're everything you need to start mining minus the actual miners. So power distribution unit, thermal management, hot air recirculation for cold days like this where we've actually got to get a bit of the heat back into the data center.
It's pretty chilly.
Yeah, a little bit. Super easy to transport, as you'll see, unlike most containers. You don't need a giant crane. We're going to be able to move it today with a forklift. You don't, if it's just a few units and you can deal with aligning them easily, you can even just put them on gravel. You don't need a concrete pad. Full UL inspection across the entire container. Not just UL components, but a UL inspection across the entire container, which is really important when you're trying to get them installed. We built, I think, about 600 of these, and there's close to 500 that are deployed across Canada and the US right now.
So you built 600 total?
Of the Minipod, yeah.
Okay, and I know you have a bigger pod too.
So the Minipod actually can join together. It looks like one big pod, but it's actually a bunch of Minipods. So the same one that we're putting in here today, you can take up to 8 of them, join them together, and then there's a switch gear in the middle. They can go up to 2.4 megawatts.
Wow, that's humble goal.
Yeah, exactly.
It's cool, 2.4 megawatts.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got clients that, and you can see them online, I mean, that have put literally hundreds of these at one location,
Yeah.
Which is just mind-blowing. It's an aluminum smelting plant worth of energy in a field with a bunch of Bitcoin mining.
So you called it a modular data center, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's cool, that sounds fancy. And what that translates to most of the time is a plug and play mining farm, right?
Exactly.
And so so right now, where do you see people deploying the most into these? Like specific miners like S19s or?
Yeah, primarily S19s. I'd say probably 10 to 15% of our customers will be Watts miners, maybe another 5% Avalon, and then the balance is all going to be Bitmain.
And so with the industrialization of mining, obviously there's just major Bitcoin mining farms, but do you see many big altcoin mining farm build outs where they're using, maybe you consider maybe like an off-brand miner, like a Gold Shell, who became popular for, mining Cadena, Nervos, Dogecoin, among other altcoins, right? They don't even have a Bitcoin miner. Do you get requests for that often, or is it really just the focus on good old SHA 256, Mr. Bitcoin?
100% SHA 256 nowadays. I mean, 2017, 2018, even a little bit into the end of 2019, there were still guys doing big alt farms, especially on the east side of stuff, with GPUs. But I'm not saying the guys aren't doing it now, but in terms of our customer base, it's every single person's Bitmain.
Yeah.
Is Bitcoin, with the majority of it being Bitmain miners.
That's interesting. And so looking at the pod, what really gets me excited about it personally is just like you seem to like just address all of the issues or concerns, everything like top to bottom. I mean, it's plug and play. Like you walk in, it's got a camera, it sees you, you got a locking door, there's light bars in there that illuminate everything. Obviously you have the shelves, the racks, the electricity. What really kind of went to the design of that, and how many iterations do you have, for example, or like until you got to this? Because you've been doing this for years now.
Yeah, so I started in end of 2016, 2 GPUs. I think they were R280s or R's. I can't even remember what they're old GPUs.
Those old Venom cards.
Yeah. in my apartment, and one thing led to another. By the end of 2017, built the first container out of a shipping container for mining Ethereum, and it's just been a learning journey the entire way. So like every couple months we make a tweak to the container and continue to add and improve them, and we'll get feedback either from our own operation or from clients giving us, hey, it would be cool if it did this, or hey, I had this challenge in this environment, what if we did this? That's the benefit that we have designing and building everything in-house. So we do literally from the raw sheet metal to the finished product. So if I want to have a prototype, on the plane coming down here, I had an idea for our new immersion tank. We're going to go and prototype that by the end of this week. So like we'll have a working concept of it on the floor. Maybe not ready for prime time, but like being able to do that quickly allows us to constantly make improvements, like do little changes like, our hot air recirculation system, changing how the filters work to make them more efficient and trap dust better, incorporate water wall, just constantly changing and not being locked to a set design that a lot of other companies are when they sub out the build to somebody else or they sub out the engineering to somebody else. Yeah. It's really expensive to change stuff, so it allows us to pivot very quickly as we need to. That's
cool. It makes you very agile. And so you've got basically like your own warehouse kind of factory setup, right? I mean, how big is your facility now?
Just under 100,000 square feet.
And how many people do you have working in there?
I think between 85 to 90 right now. Fluctuates up and down.
Yeah, depends on your mood. Somebody gets fired this week.
It depends on my mood. No.
I feel that.
Yeah, I mean, in this market, labor's definitely been a challenge. There's a lot of competition for labor. So some people come and go, but for the most part, we have really good retention. Generally speaking, when somebody's there for at least a year, they don't go anywhere for the most part.
That's cool. That's awesome. And from the manufacturing side, what's been your biggest challenge? I mean, there's the whole supply chain shortage, this, that, whatever, the last couple of years. Did you find any materials very difficult to get or see their prices skyrocket?
Yes to all of that. However, like even before 2020, I was never like a just-in-time guy. The same reason I don't like subbing stuff out. I like to have stuff on the floor.
So you stockpile?
So we stockpiled a decent chunk. That's good. And then when 2020 hit, in June, I bought double what I was going to have of everything else. But there was a time tin-plated aluminum, which we use for our overhead busways and in our smart PDUs, you just couldn't get it. It was like, you would order it and they'd be like, it'll be here sometime in the next year. And that used to be something that would come in a week or two.
It's crazy.
And the funny part is, that was when we were ordering, $20,000, $30,000 worth of it. And then all of a sudden, when you made an order 10 times the size, all of a sudden it was available. And again, what it was is the distributors were stockpiling stuff for the big customers and they didn't care about the smaller guys.
Yeah.
Same with our steel. We were running into huge issues with steel. We now have really good relationships with their distributors there. That's not as much of a problem.
It really goes to show you that reoccurring theme in business of once you get some volume, some scale, people start to take you serious, and then you develop and maintain some good relationships, and that's the difference between you or the other guy getting the only shipment of steel this week.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's cool to see, and that kind of speaks to your hard work. It's those are things. That's your proof of work.
Yeah, exactly. Labor's always been a challenge, especially wage inflation has been crazy in all aspects of the business, whether it's people in the office and engineering to just general labor, for even just janitorial staff. We had such a hard time keeping janitorial staff during COVID, just because there was so many subsidies that were being introduced to the market that it was, for a lot of people, it was easier just not to work.
No,
and you had to make it a good enough value proposition for them to come in and work versus staying at home and still getting paid and not working.
And you're in Canada.
Yeah.
And you're based out of Toronto?
Correct.
And it's definitely interesting to hear a breakdown. My point of view is similar but different. Right? Like I'm in the United States, Virginia, and we saw across the board a lot of people that they just stopped working because the government was paying them more to not work than to work.
Yep.
And what a weird dilemma we're in. Like, dude, quit your job and get a raise. Like that's like that should have been on the propaganda poster. It's the exact opposite of, you think those like "We Need You" World War II posters. So moving forward, what are you focused on? I know you mentioned the immersion pod. Is that kind of be the focus moving forward, or continuing scaling the pods, or is there a big pod on the horizon, or?
Well, the thing that we're going to keep the mini pods going, and in terms of big pod, the nice thing about having the mini pod is I just make one product. Whether it's my mini, there's different options on it, but it's one pod. Whether they're doing an 8-pod string or a single, so whether it's a 2.4 megawatt build or 150 kilowatt build, it's the same unit. So we'll keep those units there. My hesitancy to get into immersion wasn't because we didn't believe in the tech. It's because we believe in making a product that has a really good value proposition for our customer. Just because I can build it at any cost doesn't mean. I want our customers to be successful, and if they're successful, they're going to come back and buy more from us. We're not like a one and done. Most of our customers are reoccurring business.
Build a good product, not just a product.
Exactly. Our first customer who bought our first container still buys containers from us to this day.
That's a cool just stat.
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's a testament. I mean, when did you sell your first pod?
I think we delivered the first pod at the end of 2018.
Nice. That was a terrible time in cryptocurrency.
It was. It was. Temecula, California that pod went to. It was half done. They needed it. They wanted it. They needed something on site for the end of the year to energize the solar grid. It was half done. They're like, we'll take it. we energized half this 40-foot container, and the other half of it was empty. But it was, and I think it's still running. Now it's been retrofitted a bunch of changes done to it, but I think it is still running somewhere. Most of our pods are. I mean, other than the one that ran into a bridge.
That's a sad.
It was.
That's a sad story.
Somebody put it on the wrong trailer, and they drove the pod full speed into a bridge. I can chuckle now, but at the time when we saw the picture, it wasn't a chuckling matter.
So when that happens, right? And you're the business owner here. Who pays for that? Is that on the trucking company?
It went through insurance. Yeah.
Was it your insurance?
It was the trucking. That container was actually it got delivered. When we ship our pods, we don't ever let them go on the wrong truck. So those older containers had to be on a step deck. This was delivered to a site, then they resold it to somebody else. Didn't listen to the instructions, put it on the wrong truck. So when it leaves our yard, it's always on the right equipment. We don't let them leave unless it's properly shipped.
And so, I mean, that's I think a unique challenge that a lot of people don't really think about, maybe necessarily up front, but is the logistics of all of this. I mean, this is a big item. It's not easy to deal with. Just this week, you're like, we got to get through customs. And I'm like, dude, I didn't even think about customs. Like especially on a smaller scale, customs isn't something that comes to mind. And, I'm American, so we think that like we're the whole world, So, it's tough.
Yeah.
How have you dealt with that? Like, do you have a specific truck? Do you own your own trucks? Do you work with a single carrier? And then the next question is, what about overseas? Are you shipping anything across the pond?
Yeah, so bunch of answers, bunch of questions. So first, in terms of how we deal with the logistics, that's part of the reason we moved over to the Minipod. Originally, I designed that product for stranded gas plays, so guys in really rural areas, to make it easy for them to offload, build their site without a bunch of expensive equipment. So for instance, if we were bringing a conventional container here today, you would have a crane company, 2 riggers, would have cost you probably $3,000-$4,000. And we're also sitting waiting on the truck right now, so it probably would have been costing another $500-$600 an hour while we're waiting.
Yeah.
With this setup, we can just grab it with a forklift, take it off, put it down a lot easier. That helps significantly because although this is in a rural area, some of our client sites are like a 4 or 5 hour drive from civilization. So you're paying for a crane for like 3 days because it's a day in, day working there, day out.
Yeah. That's
15-20 grand. On a 40-foot container, you're 110, 150 ton crane. That's closer to 20-25 grand in some of these rural locations. With this, you can rent a forklift, drop it, take it off a lot easier. So that helped with a lot of those problems. For shipping, we try to use one carrier because we run into a lot of issues where some carriers don't follow instructions in terms of making sure that the site where it's getting delivered has the right equipment taking it off, so the right type of forks, or they don't tarp the load properly. So we deal with a carrier called Pro Logistics. They operate the actual trucks, and then their equipment is branded with our stuff, which you'll see here today.
That's cool. So when you deal with them, do they apply your branding? Like, is that something like they kind of take on and off, or like do they just have digital shovel trucks running 24/7?
Truck 24/7. So they're
and is that because you keep? Or sorry, not to cut you off. Is that because you keep them so busy? Like
they still do other loads, but like, and a lot of it might be steel. Like a steel company doesn't care if it's their logo on the side of the truck, right? Which you'll see today. Yeah, it's all permanently on there. And then on the overseas bit, every bit of the Minipod was designed with particular dimensions in mind. One, to get as many miners in there as efficiently as we can, and the other is...
How many is that?
88 S19s. The 208 version, or, well, if you're going to run it single phase, it's even less, but a 208 version, that maxes out at 43 miners, because the power capacity is cut in half. But physically, you could fit 88 in there. If you're running lower power consuming devices, then you can put more miners in there. But the dimensions of the pod fit exactly with an inch or two to spare, so that it fits into a 40-foot shipping container. So we can actually ship these overseas. We put them in like one of those open wall shipping containers, so you just drive in through the side and you can actually put 3 Minipods inside of a 40-foot.
That's what I was going to ask next. I was running mental math.
You can go through the door on a conventional container. There is 1 inch on either side. It is an absolute pain in the ass. But once you get through the door, then you've got 3 inches. It's just a matter of getting through that door. Yeah. It's still a giant pain in the ass to do it that way.
You know, guys like shiny new toys, right? And you get this, you don't want it to just seem like you got sideswiped down the whole side of the container, or you knock something loose or damaged.
So we'll have little pieces of 1x2 attached to the side, so if it slides and hits, it's the wood that's hitting. It's still it's not ideal. If you can get, an open wall shipping container, that's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
Which they're available. And generally speaking, those sites that are doing that, we've only had a couple. They're getting several containers of them. They've got an experienced crew on the other end to take the stuff off.
Yeah. So one thing I want to talk about are the different models you have, because, and my understanding is we're getting the first version of the new model.
Yeah,
right?
you're getting, it's the same pod. You're getting
same exact
first,
pod.
208 version. So
we have a 208 version.
3 hots in the ground, rather than our conventional setup is a 415 Y240. So you would have 3 hots and a neutral plus a ground that's feeding it.
And so the like layman's term of that is basically a single phase pod and a 3-phase pod, essentially, right?
No, both are 3-phase pods. The one I'm going from hot to neutral to get 240. In yours, we're going from hot to hot, like in a conventional 3-phase kind of North American commercial panel.
Okay.
415s is common in North America for data centers in particular. It is way more common over in Europe, but it's been used in the data center world for quite some time, because you can literally run half the wire size with double the power capacity.
So it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, but you need to get a specific service, specific transformer. It has to make sense. It doesn't generally make sense to do it for less than about a megawatt. You can still get transformers that are smaller, and it works. If you have access to the transformer, it makes sense.
Yeah. And so, but what about single phase deployments?
So you can hook up a single phase to this, but just 2/3 of the pod is not going to work.
Okay. It's a very common thing that we deal with in the US is just like everything is set up to be single phase unless you're dealing with like an industrial deployment.
Exactly.
I mean, you go overseas, they have the beauty of 3-phase. It's a much, depending where you go. But it's a more efficient setup, reduces your amp draw, among other things. But when you start to try to scale out a mining farm, you realize that all the big boys are using 3-phase, and all the gear is 3-phase. And when I reached out to you, you're like, yeah, it's 3-phase. I'm like, well, Scott, I don't have 3-phase. Can we make it single phase? And you're like, kind of.
You can. It's just
it's going to take an adjustment.
2/3 of it's not going to work for now.
Yeah.
And it's, again, I want to highlight, it's not just the 3-phase. So like our on the 3-phase power coming in, most of our clients, if I measure from phase to phase, they're measuring 415 volt.
Yeah.
Even if you got 3-phase here, is going to read 208 volt or 480, which is pretty common here as well. And 480 won't work because from hot to neutral, it's going to give me 277. which most miners won't run on. Some do, but most miners won't run on. So having that higher voltage that they transmit at, which is the same case in Europe. It's more, UK is 415, rest of Europe is usually around 380, which will give you 220 from hot to neutral.
Okay. Yeah, right now we're in the permitting process to bring three-phase, specifically 208, out here. So with that in mind, that means that this existing pod, we can simply flip over to three-phase, correct?
It's set up so you can do that.
And so at that point, we would increase our capacity by a third.
2/3. Because right now you're going to only be running one phase, and then you'll have 2 more phases coming in.
Okay. And so with the pods at full capacity, what is the amps that are available?
So at 415, it's 400 amps, 3-phase, I think.
I thought you said 700 something.
So technically the mains, the 2 main breakers are actually, they're 2 350 amp PDUs. Technically that's what those PDUs can handle.
Okay.
But you can't get that many, you can't fit that many miners into
Okay.
it. So if you're running all the PDUs flat out, that would require you running miners at like 4,100 watts, I think it is, in order to completely max that out. But you wouldn't be able to actually, like the data center itself maxes out at more than that.
Okay.
416.
416?
Yeah.
And so you have 416 of usable amps.
Usable amps before, and that's like actual power, not like with a 20% derating.
Yeah, okay. So, you know, it's essentially like a 500 amp deployment with like the 80% rule.
Correct.
And then so in our case...
At 415. Now, if it's at 208, I can redo math here.
I can do math.
Yeah, so at yours, it's still a 500 amp service at 208, but that's the point. You can only run 43 miners versus 88 miners, which is, and that's assuming at a 3-phase. You're running a third of that though.
So then we look at single phase residential electricity, which is 120 volt here. And you know, we use both legs, and that's how we get to the 240 volt. That's when we get 1/3 of the deployable capacity.
Correct.
And so
and there is a way. We'll talk to the electrician, but there is a way we can kind of MacGyver that 3-phase panel to double that amperage. But he's got to make sure the right protections are in place to do that. Don't do this at home yourself, kids. Get an electrician.
I am bringing.
He is.
I like the DIY stuff, but electricity is very serious because not only, you know, there's fire hazards, things like that, but you can just fry your gear, and that's expensive.
Yeah.
That's a bad time.
Well, I mean that's I guess one of the other differentiating points about our pod is they are very safe. So a lot of PDUs that are on the market, you know, you'll have a 150 amp main breaker or 30 or 40 amp main breaker, and then nothing else protecting each individual miner. So on our PDU, every outlet has its own 20 amp breaker, and then within that, the smart PDU actually current limits them to 17 amps, because on a 20 amp circuit, you shouldn't be pulling more than 16.5 amps anyways.
Yeah.
The software will actually trip it before the breaker goes to protect the miners for exact instances like that.
It's good, it's double protection.
Yeah, exactly. Not only that, you can reset it remotely through the smart PDU. But like, yeah, I guess on the safety side, I'm talking more when I say MacGyvering a panel to make something work. It's not that it's unsafe, but it's something that you know, trained professional, a licensed professional should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So then just to kind of round out that piece of the conversation, without MacGyvering, customizing anything, we deploy 1/3. What's our usable amps? And if we just look at Antminer S19s, how many of those could we deploy?
So what, about 120-ish amps type of thing? And then S19s on that. So yeah, it'll be a third of the pod. So you would be like 12 or 13 on there. You could probably tweak more in there, but we have about 12 or 13.
Okay, there you have it. What I think is really cool with the way you've kind of been adjusting this is now anyone, anywhere can deploy this. And I think it's perfect. It's perfectly suited for what I'm doing because I've got the service to hook it up and run it now, and I'm bringing really the proper service in to run it at scale. Hopefully, I hope soon, bro. We're talking like a year-ish with the way things go with permitting and easements. But that kind of speaks to like the modular factor or the way you're building this out, which is very cool. And I know I'm a very small scale miner, especially compared to a lot of your clients, but I think this is a really cool way for smaller scale miners to get involved, to have a plug and play option, and to have something that's scalable. And not that this is your goal, but to have the ability to resell your pod down the road. I mean, it's a standardized, people can be familiar with it, it has branding. Whereas, I customized the shed to be a little mining farm. That's not as easily resellable or as easily transported as something standardized like your device.
Yeah, and there's a decent used market for them out there, and especially like when we're back into a bull market and our lead times get long. Like right now, we have stuff in stock. But when Bitcoin was 60K, it was 22 to 30 weeks to order a pod. Guys were selling pods of ours that were 3 years old for like triple what they bought them for. Because our name's gotten around now and people know the company, and it's not just some...
You can scalp anything. Yeah. You can scalp anything. Seriously. We're scalping pods, we're scalping miners. Shipping container, just raw cost prices were through the roof, that they became uninteresting the last couple of years. And now they're finally coming back down to reality. But
yeah, I don't know what we would have done if we were still using shipping containers to build, because you just couldn't get them.
Yeah.
Like forget what the price was. For a while, you just couldn't get containers.
My original plan with this was actually just to get a shipping container. If you actually look at the sizing, it's pretty much a shipping container. But the lead time and price had gone up so much, I could just have a shed built and delivered, easily for cheaper.
Yeah. Which is ironic where the price of lumber was, right?
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't like lumber was cheap. Cool, well, too much talking. Let's go check out the container and do a walking tour.